Hello and welcome to the Week in Review live on NTN. We'd like to thank you so much for tuning in. Today is Saturday, the 7th of November. If you're watching on air online, welcome to you. Residents here in St. Lucia, St. Lucians in the diaspora, well-wishers globally, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're here on the ground or you've spoken to somebody who is in St. Lucia, you know it's a very rainy day. And for those of you huddled up in your homes today, we do appreciate you making us your morning station to get the latest updates from the government of St. Lucia. My name is Jessie Leonce. I'm joined in studio by my colleagues as usual, Mr. Tony Nicholas and Lisa Joseph. And we also have a special guest joining us today. Her name is Ms. Doreen Georges, and she is the Public Relations Manager at the St. Lucia Tourism Authority. We'd like to welcome you this morning, Doreen.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Bonjour, bonjour. Sunshine on the inside. Thank you, Jareen. Thank you so much.
We definitely appreciate you being here to just give us some insight on tourism matters. We know quite a few things are happening. The ARC Rally for Cruisers, Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, my bad, is happening. And also some flights coming in this weekend. So we appreciate you being here. To top off the morning, we're taking a look back at the week that was from Friday to Friday. That's October 30th to November 5th. We so far recorded 34 new cases of COVID-19 here on Ireland, bringing our national tally to 110 cases. 78 of these cases are active, and most of these cases in the last week were captured through the contact tracing process. I just want us to, as we begin the morning, air the statement, the latest statement coming from the Ministry of Health on the latest 4 cases recorded yesterday afternoon, Friday afternoon, that were coming from the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmar George. Take a look.
Today, Friday, November 6th, 2020, the Ministry of Health and Wellness received confirmation of 4 new cases of COVID-19. This brings the total number of cases in country to 110. Case number 107 is a 57-year-old female from the Labrie district. Case number 108 is a 58-year-old female from the Labrie district. Case number 109 is a 71-year-old male from the Labrie district. Case number 110 is a 24-year-old male from the Castries district. All of the cases following testing for COVID-19 were placed in quarantine awaiting their test results. All 4 of these cases were identified through contact tracing process, and epidemiological links have been established for all 4 cases. Case number 107 is linked to case number 106. Case number 108 is linked to case number 104. Case number 109 is linked to case number 69. Case number 110 is linked to case number 95. As per protocol, the arrangements have been made for the transfer of these individuals into care at the respiratory hospital. The new cases now bring the number of active cases in country to 78. All of the cases remain stable, and there are no cases requiring critical care. The Ministry of Health continues to remind the public that it is in the interest of the health of the nation to avoid engaging in social gatherings and activities which lend themselves to a greater risk of exposure to the virus. The risk of transmission is greater when people come together in one space. It is with this reality in mind, the Ministry of Health advises the public to venture out into public places only when it is necessary, which includes work, to conduct business, or for obtaining groceries or supplies for their households. By restricting movement to these activities, the risk of exposure to the virus will be reduced. Continue practicing the guidelines, which include wash your hands frequently with soap and water or the use of alcohol-based hand sanitizer when hand washing is not possible, to wear a mask every time you are in public, to maintain the separation of 6 feet from others, which is about 2 arms lengths apart, and to seek medical care if you're experiencing respiratory symptoms, which include fever, cough, shortness of breath, or sore throat. Also, avoid contact with anyone experiencing respiratory symptoms. The Ministry of Health and Wellness will continue providing updates as new information becomes available.
That was the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmar George, speaking on the 4 latest cases of COVID diagnosed in country. To remind you that we had 34 new cases in the last week from Friday to Friday, that block there, bringing our total number of cases here on island to 110. 78 of these cases are active. So 78 of these cases, these individuals are being treated, being cared for at this point in time, and the increasing number of COVID-19 cases in country has resulted in the relocation of a key facility. The decision has been taken to house COVID-19 patients, positive patients, at the Turning Point Rehabilitation Center. This move is necessary given the respiratory hospital is not operating at full capacity due to delays in construction. The relocation of Turning Point is a temporary arrangement until the respiratory hospital is fully functional. We have Nancy Francis, the executive director at the Owen King EU Hospital and the Respiratory Hospital, with some further details.
The new venue will support the continued efforts of the Department of Health and Wellness to provide care to all COVID-19 patients, thereby limiting the spread of the virus. As a result, the patients at the Turning Point Rehabilitative Center have been transferred to another facility for continued care. The transfer of patients to the new facility will assure that their full rehabilitative and clinical care are met. Family members, loved ones who wish to drop off supplies for patients at the new facility, that is the Turning Point Rehabilitative Center, must drop them off at the security booth to the back of the National Mental Wellness Center, adjacent to the Millennium Highway, at 7 a.m., 12 noon, and 5 p.m. Suggested items are 2 weeks of clothing, toiletries, toilet paper, cutlery utensils, water, tea, milk, sugar, soap, wash rags, body lotion, cream, mosquito repellent, hand sanitizer, healthy snacks, plastic bags, books, magazines, and if applicable, prescribed medication, sanitary napkins, crutches, cane, or cell phone chargers. For further information, please call the Respiratory Hospital at 458-6526 or email respiratoryh@govt.lc.
That clip there from Nancy Francis, the executive director at the Owen King EU Hospital and the Respiratory Hospital, speaking on the arrangements that are being made to accommodate COVID-19 patients here on island. We know health officials are working feverishly to strengthen the island's capacity of managing the COVID-19 patients. In the last few weeks, we've seen a sharp increase as compared to previous weeks, and so there are works at refining the structural and operational plans for the respiratory hospital. Lisa?
And those works, we know that as the respiratory hospital stands, we have something in the region of 84 beds. And the feverish work that's taking place is to get the respiratory hospital up to a capacity of 126, because as we could see, the numbers are increasing. I think what most of us in the public, what we do not appreciate is the retrofitting that needs to happen. People familiar with Victoria Hospital would know that you get onto a ward and it's just this open space, and you have the patients, the beds, and of course you have
air or hospital.
Yes, and then you have the curtains and so. But with the respiratory hospital, that's not what it is, and you cannot have that. So what the authorities had to do is design plans where you have separate rooms. And those rooms need to be sealed in a particular manner because you're dealing with a virus. And so you have to allow for closed spaces. So this week we had the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Health, Benson Emil. He was on and explaining that even for the rooms that have already been created and are occupied, you need to ensure that you have the proper cooling system in there as well, because you will need to have particular equipment in there. And we know the sensitivity of medical equipment. So that is happening. In order now to do a remaining 44 rooms and to get the cooling system there, they've had to petition, if you will, the World Bank, which is funding the project, and to say, well, can we procure equipment locally? Because having to do so regionally, internationally, it's taken longer than it should because of COVID-19. So the World Bank, they're waiting a response on that. because as anyone would know, once you've entered into a loan agreement with these institutions, you don't do what you want. Permission, if you will, quote unquote, must be sought in order for you to alter any aspect of that agreement. So that is being awaited. But one of the things that really struck me, and it struck me this morning, my mom came in and she came in from the market and just saying to me, I can't believe that people still think that COVID is a hoax here. And I'm like, really? She says, like, people are having this huge debate downtown and saying that no one is dying from COVID in St. Lucia, so that's not real. It's not COVID people have here. And I'm like, I can't believe that at this stage, with the announcement of 110 or 76 active cases, that people are still thinking that COVID is a hoax, and there are still people who are not adhering to the protocols. Small pocket of people, however, the implications of that, we don't want to, even consider what those implications are. So it is not a hoax, and I'm happy that Jeraine is here today because while she is in a better place to explain to St. Lucians all of those international business implications that we do not consider on the ground. Because you think it's a hoax, okay, but why? Why would a country want to put itself on a list, if you will, infected with COVID and cases continuously rising? There is no benefit for us. In fact, it is more detrimental to us. And once it's detrimental to St. Lucia, it's detrimental to me, to you, to everyone. Because the fallout from that is beyond what we can even imagine. We say, oh, people are out of work, but can we begin to trace how they became out of work and the implications of that, the impact of that? I mean, so for me, I am really at a sort of, and perhaps in a shock and awe, if you will, that this is still a conversation in our country. So, Jeraine, thank you so much for coming so that we can begin to understand fully what this means for us.
Thank you again, guys. Lisa, I must say personal responsibility begins with us all. While the protocols are in place for travel and for us on the ground, even for returning nationals, we all have to take that level of personal responsibility in terms of how we help to manage our own prevention of COVID-19. So we note what has been happening within the tourism industry, and we continue to enforce these protocols. We continue to grant refresher sessions wherever necessary and whenever possible. We see the certification process that has been going on for tours, for hotels, for sites and attractions. And so we continue to ensure that at every juncture, everything that we do is guided by the Department of Health and Wellness in terms of safeguarding the St. Lucian population.
Wonderful. But sorry, Jessie, but now that we were managing the safe reopening, we have heard that the UK, the lockdown, is in effect. And so that means several things for us. So I know for today is we are winding down our flights from the UK with the carriers. So give us an update on that and what will be happening during this lockdown period for the UK.
Well, the UK announced a lockdown up until the 2nd of December. Of course, we will see very limited flights in between. Britons are still allowed to travel for work and I guess other critical reasons. However, flights will remain very limited. In fact, British Airways has announced suspension come Wednesday the 11th. TUI has already moved in that direction as well. We were also looking forward to welcoming another TUI flight this week. But of course, it's a health crisis and that is of priority. But what we have noticed from the UK markets is that those who have come are increasing their stay or extending their stay rather well beyond the UK lockdown period. Some have indicated that this is quite mental and they would rather just be away from lockdown. So they're here, and it also speaks well as to the continued operation of the hotels that the various airlines service. And it also means that more people get to remain on the job because we saw the impact of COVID-19 in the earlier stages.
And just to further speaking on the lockdown, we've so far, I want to go back to the word that Lisa was making on the situation where people think it's a hoax right now. And we've seen that many countries, especially in Europe, are going on what you call specific lockdowns again. Can you speak to that and what implications it's having for us here in St. Lucia overall, not just the flights, but in terms of our continued marketing of St. Lucia?
Overall, we see what is happening on the international scale is pretty much a second wave of COVID-19. So even with the continued travel operations, take for example, Air Canada is only returning to the destination for the first time today since lockdown. Canada has had so many strict protocols in place that even if somebody moves outside of Canada, they would have to quarantine for a 14-day period upon return. If they were to move interstate, they would also have to quarantine. So that goes to tell us that this is not a hoax and that the international countries are also taking measures to safeguard their population. Just last week, St. Lucia had to take added steps to ensure a level of security. So in terms of the domino effect and the effect locally, it doesn't just affect tourism. There's a continued spin in terms of what happens because tourism in itself services so many other industries.
Pre-COVID, during any election period in the United States, there's usually a pullback in terms of visitors traveling around that time. What is the trend that we've witnessed this past month, the last couple of months, in terms of U.S. visitors to the island?
It has not dwindled per se. In fact, today we're also welcoming a JetBlue flight from Boston. United Airlines is also coming back to the destination today. An additional American Airlines flight is also resuming today. So the U.S. market per se is not quiet. We have more or less shifted focus now to the US market and the UK market in light of the UK being locked down, but definitely our efforts are to ensure that St. Lucia remains top of mind. And the protocols are really highlighted out there because, of course, in encouraging travel, we must first observe what is necessary for travel, which is the health and safety, safeguarding our local communities.
What is the sentiment generally of the visitors who are already in St. Lucia and knowing that their home is back on lockdown?
They're pretty much extending their stay. Some of them have indicated that they will be returning. Majority have extended actually. Okay. In conversation with some of the hotels, they have extended.
Okay. Yeah. And closer to home, in the region, can you speak to us about the status, our bubble status, so to speak?
St. Lucia's bubble status remains the same. So when the initial bubble was created, that was with the CARICOM Islands, what St. Lucia did was to move beyond the requirements of what the CARICOM countries were requiring and include pre-testing. So anyone coming to St. Lucia, whether they were coming from the bubble or from an international jurisdiction, would have had to pre-test prior to coming to St. Lucia. So while the other countries were encouraging free movement, pretty much, St. Lucia required the testing. Our bubble now has scaled back. Of course, we had noted earlier on community spread in some of the islands, and then our bubble had to be pretty much scaled back. I think we have 6 countries in our bubble right now, but the protocol remains the same. You test prior to coming within 7 days of arrival, pre-fill the travel registration form, and once you've obtained a negative COVID-19 result, you're able to move around just as a local and access all of the facilities and all of the pretty much enjoy life as a local on the island.
We've also seen our status level with the CDC, the
yes.
US, we're at level 1.
We're at level 1. Initially, we had moved away from being on the any level rating, and then there was no, what we call a no health advisory required for St. Lucia. But now we're back at level 1. It's still, level 1 pretty much advises travelers to observe the protocols that are in place. It also means that on any St. Lucian or anyone traveling to the US would not have to quarantine on arrival in the US. So I think now with the identifying of the cases more or less as clusters and not necessarily community spread, I think we're in a good place to somewhat return to our no health advisory should we start to see a decline in cases.
But how does that affect the marketing? Give us what happens on the inside when that revision came. How do you see that affecting what we do in order to sell the island?
In fact, Lisa, to be honest, I don't see it affecting us. We continue to do everything in our power to ensure that accurate information on St. Lucia is always put into the public domain. We never shy away from saying, okay, this is what it is at the moment. I think we hear comments. We've done several reviews with the visitors, some of which we have aired on NTN, and you would hear the visitors say that, coming to St. Lucia is even safer than going to a large chain store in the US, or that sort of thing. So even with the travel process, they're highlighting that in their own countries they don't see these stringent measures. So we're optimistic. We keep putting out the information as much as we can on St. Lucia and what the protocols are and what is being observed. We have not seen a spike in cases as it relates to visitor travel. In fact, we had one such case so far, which is case 27. He was later repatriated with the intervention of the embassy and the relevant travel authorities there. And so we continue to observe as much as we can the protocols and ensure that St. Lucia is always top of mind in terms of our marketing.
But that's such a hard sell to the public that visitors do not pose this exceedingly high risk of being able to transmit COVID-19. So what would an agency like yours, how do you begin to even appease the public, explain that what you do at the ports is at a level to that, if there were to be such a person coming in, that you're able to have that intervention immediately?
Okay, so for the entry protocols, what we have in place is you must pre-test prior to coming to St. Lucia. So when you obtain that negative COVID-19 PCR test, in pre-filling your travel registration form, you must upload your COVID-19 test. That test is then verified prior to you receiving confirmation for travel. Your reservation at a hotel is also verified prior to receiving confirmation for travel. So when you get into St. Lucia and you're at the nurses station, this is just now an added layer of security. At the nurses station, you go through the thermal screening, hand sanitizing, pre-filling of your declaration forms and all of that. If there is a need or if someone happens to slip through the crack and arrive with an antigen test, they're swabbed at the airport. They're then placed in quarantine until a result is obtained. If they have obtained a positive result, then the necessary actions would have to be taken in terms of transferring to the COVID-19 respiratory hospital and all of the necessary steps. So at every juncture, even at the hotels, there are protocols to guide how they function. With the taxi operation as well, they must wear a mask throughout the journey. So everything that we do is to ensure a level of security, and we've continued to highlight what happens when and how at every step. The flight process, the airports, the hotels, for the taxi, the sites and attractions, all of that we continue to highlight.
So you've beefed up what in terms of whether it be the supporting equipment that you would need, materials. So talk to us about the numbers going on. You have more nurses, medical
well, with
people
the increased flights today, and we're going to notice more flights coming in up until April or so, which is what we call our winter period, which is usually a busy period. With that, there was a need for enforcing and strengthening on the logistics at the airport. So we've increased these physical distancing markers. Another thermal scanner has been installed. There are additional nurses at the nurses station to ensure a level of more or less to expedite the process and not have lines backed up, because we would notice that we have about 6 flights landing within short space of each other. And there's a full complement of immigration, a full complement of customs on duty, additional taxi drivers on duty as well. That means, more taxi drivers also returning to work. And it is all in an effort to help to speed up the process at the airport so that you don't have people clustering more or less.
Could you give us an update in terms of the number of sites and attractions that are now open, and how does it work in terms of the protocols and visitors accessing those sites and attractions vis-a-vis locals having access to those sites and attractions as well?
Well, Tony, I don't have the final count because just yesterday the team was on the ground again certifying some, but in among the major ones that have been open are the Piton Trail, the Sulphur Springs, Pigeon Island National Landmark. We have the Botanical Gardens in Soufriere, Diamond Falls. So some of these are open and others are also open. Rainforest Sky Rides is also open. But with that, what happens is there are designated days and times for locals and designated days for visitors, so that you don't have that commingling or the intermingling, and you have enough time to sanitize the things that are necessary for sanitizing before a local can come to the sites.
Now, I know, again, this is a highly sensitive thing, because we've heard that complaint, we've heard that sort of expressed displeasure where the hotels are concerned, that locals are being told they can't come into the hotels where the guests are. So explain to us the thinking behind, even at the attractions, that you're having separate days and times for visitors and locals.
At a hotel, you don't know who you come into contact with. There can be intermingling and so on. Even with the tables being separated 6 feet apart, you continue to use, various areas. There's frequent sanitization, yes, but it is an added level of security. It's an added measure of ensuring that, any cross contact is avoided. And so with the sites and attractions, you have designated days for locals. So for example, at the Sulphur Springs, weekdays are for visitors, weekends are for locals. So that would give you adequate time to sanitize what it needs to be sanitized, and enough time to ensure that you can adequately sanitize your place.
Okay. And now to some more exciting developments. We have Atlantic Rally for Cruisers. What can we expect this year in terms of the rollout?
This year, the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers is really happening under very strict COVID-19 protocols. We have various protocols that are being observed with the rally kicking off. So yes, the rally is happening this year. A lot of thought and a lot of consideration had to go into what would take place for the rally. We've had several meetings to discuss the way forward. That included the Ministry of Health, Environmental, Tourism Authority, ECSL, IGY Rodney B Marinas, World Cruising Club, and all of the relevant stakeholders, including the usual sponsors and new sponsors as well. So this year, we can see that it is happening, observing very strict COVID-19 protocols. As we know, St. Lucia has been home to ARC for 30 years so far. This year is the 31st year. And in doing so, a number of protocols had to be observed from Las Palmas all the way down to St. Lucia. So ARC Plus will kick off tomorrow, Sunday the 8th, with a total of 26 vessels. And some of the protocols in place is that the vessels were to arrive in Las Palmas no less than 1 week prior to departure. So on arrival in Las Palmas, they would pretty much do their shopping, because of course they're going to sail out for quite a period. Then they test. Once they obtain a negative COVID-19 result, they are then to isolate. They would do their briefing on St. Lucia's COVID-19 protocols electronically. And so they remain in isolation, they set sail, and they remain aboard the vessel. Of course, it's a direct route. Well, it's not a direct route. They make a stop, but they're not allowed to disembark. So they continue on to St. Lucia. When they arrive in St. Lucia, there are several protocols that must be followed. In that, there will be mandatory health screening upon arrival. There will be continued wearing of the wristbands to differentiate non-quarantine participants from those cleared for movement by Port Health. You will also have daily health screening of those in quarantine. And additionally, individuals aboard the vessels arriving in St. Lucia ahead of a 14-day period. So as much as they're quarantining from they get to Las Palmas, they're sailing down to St. Lucia. If they observe less than 14 days on the water, they're still required to quarantine in St. Lucia. So all efforts are to ensure that this is one of the safest events that we are hosting. It's amongst one of our first national events to date. We've seen the virtual Creole event happen, and now we're observing ARC. But all efforts are to ensure that there is an adequate time for quarantine with the vessels on the water. So once they have been signed off by Port Health after the 14-day quarantine period, the participants can return to the vessel. And when we say return to the vessel, that is because upon arrival, once they're cleared by Port Health, they have the option to remain on their vessel. They can also stay at COVID-certified accommodation properties. So once they have cleared the 14 days at the accommodation property, or their quarantine period rather, because some of it will be observed along the journey, then they are able to return to their vessel. With that, any vessel arriving at night must remain at anchor until cleared by Port Health. So once they're cleared by Port Health, they're either free to move about, observing that they've gone through the quarantine period, or they're directed to the quarantine dock, which is at the IGY Rodney Bay Marina, and of course the finish line for the event. So with that as well, Sailors will be required to reside on their vessels or at a certified property throughout the duration of their stay if they have not met the quarantine period. And vessels will as well be moored in an offset pattern. So there will be a 15 feet separation between all of the vessels. Usually the vessels would have been, close knit and so on, but with the COVID-19 protocols, that is not allowed. So the vessels would have to be set in a moored pattern of 15 feet apart. All passengers and crew on board the vessels must always wear a face mask once outside the cabin, and security will also be available 24 hours to ensure all rules and protocols of St. Lucia are followed, and crew members have also been reminded that any violation could result in a charge or imprisonment. So these are the protocols that will be guiding the ARC this year.
And in terms of the marina, if you could just speak to us about the space in terms of persons coming out and going in, what would that atmosphere be like?
Okay, so usually in the past we would see a lot of vessels coming in for the ARC. This year, the number of vessels participating are a lot less. So with the ARC Plus, we have 26 vessels, and with the ARC itself, we have 60 vessels. Of that, 452 crew members are participating from 134 nationalities, and amongst that we have 37 children who are part of the crew and bringing out that phenomenal feat down to St. Lucia. When it comes to the protocols and the access at the marina, access remains the same. Of course, you would have had to be cleared by Port Health as a crew member to be able to access the regular operations at the marina, just like the locals are able to access. So if you have not met the requirements by Port Health, you will remain in quarantine. That means you are on a dock that is secure, that is also monitored by security, so that way you, as someone who have not met the quarantine requirements, are not able to access and mingle with anybody else.
Are those protocols the standard protocols that currently obtained for yachts coming into St. Lucia generally?
These are the standard protocols that are observed for vessels coming into St. Lucia as well, and any vessel coming in must also declare their status of arrival and their health, pretty much their health status prior to arrival in St. Lucia.
So what are some of the setup like at the marina? I know you spoke about Port Health, but in terms of on the ground there, any facilities that we would have to be putting in to ensure that people are adhering to the protocols and to just overall health, for the temperature checks and things of that sort, would that happen daily?
That happens daily. There will be daily health screening by the Port Health authorities. So there's pretty much their station at the marina. We have the securities on duty, and of course Port Health is supposed to be clearing all of the vessels before they can even disembark. So if they are to arrive at night, they must remain on the vessel until Port Health is able to give the all clear. And of course, all of the vessels, as in previous years, you're able to track, you're able to see when they're coming in. And so, as much as ARC is happening, all of the fanfare that we've had in the past is pretty much scaled back in terms of how we observe the ARC rally this year.
Talking about a fanfare, I know our friends in the media and certainly your sponsors every year used to look forward to the flotilla. Has that been curtailed due to COVID-19 this year?
Pretty much curtailed due to COVID-19 this year.
And this is certainly an opportunity. ARC is an opportunity for St. Lucia to really show itself to the world that it's able to manage activities of this scale, much lesser tourism activity here on island.
It's really opened up our eyes in terms of how we rethink events. And I think going forward, a lot of the protocols could be applied to how events are managed locally. Of course, we must observe the mass crowd numbers that are recommended by the health authorities, and of course the space and everything that is required. But I think it is really an opportunity for us to rethink how we manage events.
Yeah, because for the mass crowd size is at 25. The numbers that you've given far surpass that. So in terms of how are you going to engage, and I suppose that is something that can flesh out down the line, but I would imagine that the planning right now is to plan around that 25
Whatever
number.
the prescribed numbers would be for the, we know the 25, we're looking at the 25 for a period of a month.
November.
But let's see what happens come December. Of course, this is a fluid situation. But whatever the requirements would be for the mass crowd events, these are the numbers that would be observed.
So for the authority, the ARC, we know, yes, it happens all the time, and every year, it's, as Tony was saying, the fanfare is a celebratory time, and in December, Christmas, everybody's in that festive mood. Why not decide to simply just call off the event?
Well, we thought about a lot of ways that the event could have been hosted. We have had extensive dialogue with the health authorities, the World Cruising Club, several meetings in terms of how we could go about hosting the ARC. Because of course the sailors themselves, this is their annual event, and they were very excited. A lot of them are very excited to be back on familiar soil. So we really took into consideration how the event could have been observed. Of course, you also needed to test your waters in terms of how you could really put yourself out there in terms of rethinking events. So you have to start somewhere, and for us, the start of it, that would really be with the ARC in terms of getting all of the protocols outlined and in place. There will be strict enforcement because this for us is, it means a lot. We know the impact and the domino effect of ARC, the benefits to the local community, and so we want to ensure that ARC coming to St. Lucia for our 31st anniversary can be something that is well observed.
Yes, what we're going to do is just take a quick break. When we come back, we speak more with Ms. Doreen Georges, the Public Relations Manager from the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, and we delve into other news happening for this past week. We have quite a few activities. Government and fishers take an amicable and unanimous position on the sector's role in helping protecting the nation's borders. Also, farmers and the St. Lucia Marketing Board sign off on a purchasing agreement, and roadworks in the Rodney Bay area. If you've traveled up there, you'd have seen it's happening right now. It now enters a heightened phase toward completion. Stay with us.
Cette lisi ka registre vers min corona ek I ka fait mouvement ek an chay vitesse tan chaque canef ka kouye pour vigilance publique la fait wolo parler en place publique qu'on bon en mai base ti boutique changer distance sociale 6 pieds Rodyon à l'autre. I ka travail tan, si ou senti ko pas cordial, quarantine ko, pas en contact et puis l'autre, en cas où te toi pe exposé. C'est un écouye, free one ou ben n'importe clinique yo pou. Les pays a dimi à clé, ça veut dire les supermarkets, pharmacies et puis ATM, yo accessible avant c'était souhait. Pays à clé en plein, ça veut dire tout bagay fermé à 24 heures. Servi protocole comme sorti par bureau indication santé. Nous tout ensemble, ça sauver vers mine corona. Si nous tous servi Jidla à toutes les.
Together let us win this war. St. Lucia be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
Thank you so much for staying with us. This is the Week in Review. We're live on NTN, coming to you from the Information Command Center, looking at the week that was. We're speaking to Ms. Doreen Georges, the Public Relations Manager at the St. Lucia Tourism Authority. Just before we went to break, we were covering the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers. It is still on for 2020. We know many activities have had to be put on hold, cancelled, rescheduled, postponed, but the ARC is on, albeit under a less scaled down version of it. We also spoke about the flights that are coming into St. Lucia, our status at the airports so far, and coming into the Tourism Levy Act, which you just mentioned to us during the break. We know that there was some public concern, and the government has, as promised, reviewed the Tourism Levy Act. Speak to us about that.
Well, that has been there are considerations up for that going back to the House. A lot of the recommendations has been revised, and so government will also make further announcement on that in the coming week.
Okay, and to go back to our Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, I know many persons were on standby for that legislation, so we can see this coming to the House this week.
Government will make an announcement as to the direction on the levy. I know a lot of consideration has gone into that. There has been several amendments. And so I believe the announcement will come from PM's office on the way forward.
Okay, we stand by for that. Back to the ARC. If you could just, for the benefit of our viewers who might be just joining us or who have been listening and might have missed out on some of the information, go over some of the highlights, the tent poles of ARC for this year.
Okay, so just to recap, ARC 2020 is happening. We have ARC Plus kicking off from Las Palmas, the Gran Canaria, tomorrow, the 8th of November. And the ARC event will set sail on Sunday, the 22nd. But for us in St. Lucia, as much as we're celebrating a highlight on the 31st anniversary of ARC to St. Lucia, our focus is really on the protocols that would protect the sailors, those at the forefront of the event, as well as the general public. And so for us, the requirements would be that the crew members arrive in Las Palmas no less than 1 week prior to departure to St. Lucia. When they arrive in Las Palmas, they are required to obtain a COVID-19 negative test, following which they must isolate. All of their briefings on St. Lucia's protocols happen remotely. And once they set sail to St. Lucia, they are to remain in isolation aboard their vessels. On arrival in St. Lucia, they must continue to observe all of the protocols here on island, and that includes mandatory health screening, daily health screening for those in quarantine, wearing of wristbands to differentiate non-quarantine participants from those cleared for movement by Port Health. And additionally, individuals aboard all vessels arriving in St. Lucia ahead of the 14-day sailing period from the point of departure in Las Palmas will be required to quarantine aboard the vessel at anchor, on the quarantine dock at the IGY Rodney Bay Marina, or at a COVID-19 certified hotel until they are cleared by Port Health. Once signed off by the Port Health office, after the 14-day quarantine period, the participants may return to the vessel, and that is for those who have not observed the full period on the vessel, but at the COVID certified properties as we indicated before. And individuals on vessels arriving at night must remain aboard the vessels at anchor until cleared by Port Health Authority. And sailors definitely would be required to reside on their vessels, again, at a COVID-certified property throughout the duration of their stay if they have not met the quarantine period. And in light of physical distancing, that will also be observed with the vessels in terms of them being moored at a minimum of 15 feet apart. All passengers and crew aboard the vessel must wear a face mask once outside of their cabin, and security will be available 24 hours to ensure that these protocols are observed. And might I add, crew members have also been briefed that failure to adhere to protocols is punishable by law in terms of fines or imprisonment. And I just want to reiterate that the sailors are pretty much observing 3 weeks to about a month in quarantine, which we deem by our health authorities a very safe window for observing the protocols.
And you said that they presented their PCR test, negative test. They'll be required to do so in Las Palmas. So explain to us, to whom are they presenting this? Who is overseeing that? Do we have a St. Lucian interest positioned there in Las Palmas to ensure that all of what needs to be done is being done?
Entry to St. Lucia remains the same. You must pre-fill the travel registration form and declare your health status before arrival in St. Lucia as it relates to COVID-19. So once you declare that health status, then you are given the green light, and the vessels, once arriving or nearing St. Lucia, must also declare their health status again as to what obtains on the vessels, number of persons, and so on.
Over the years, what are some of the direct economic benefits we have derived from the ARC?
Direct economic benefits span a large scale. We see the spin-off with the hotels, the marinas, the bars, rental of vehicles, gas stations by extension, down to our coconut vendors benefit in a spin-off of the ARC.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly this year we're seeing the scale down. And if you just go over the restrictions now that we're dealing with the COVID-19 situation, persons from the marina, some of the visitors who are interested in going to a hotel, perhaps?
Any visitor going to a hotel would have to go to a COVID-19 certified hotel. So all of the rules and regulations that apply at the airport, at the regular hotels, well, when I say regular hotels, the COVID-19 certified hotels, all of the rules and regulations that apply there would have to apply to a visitor or a crew member who has not observed the full 14-day quarantine period. If that person has cleared their quarantine period and still wishes to reside at a COVID-19 certified property, then they will be granted clearance by the health authorities with a certificate of health, for lack of a better term, certificate of health that would allow them to be able to access the hotel and the public.
So once they've been cleared, they do have access to places like the supermarkets where traditionally you go to.
Once they have been cleared, yes. Yes.
I know the arc doesn't just happen. You don't have people who just hop on a boat and decide that they sail into St. Lucia.
Absolutely.
So it is happening in a very organized fashion. And so meaning that there is that organizing committee, authority, organization, whatever you want to call it. World Cruising Club?
World Cruising Club.
So the conversation with the World Cruising Club on how they are organizing things on their end in light of COVID-19. So could speak to us about what they're doing, their commitment to ensuring that their participants, because it's really their participants, are safe.
Well, the relationship that we have had with WCC over the years, Lisa, would really speak to, you know, the relationship and how it continues. And we've always had their full cooperation in terms of the rules and requirements in terms of the ARC. 2020 is no different. What we have in place are the rules that would guide how they enter St. Lucia in terms of the COVID-19 protocols. And so once they've been cleared by Port Health, it's really, really to just enjoy St. Lucia and move out and about as they have done in the previous years. But the cooperation remains the same. It's the same with WCC, it's the same with our sponsors, and so we're moving ahead.
Any St. Lucians participating this year?
That I don't have confirmed just yet. That I don't have just yet.
Okay. We'd like to thank you very much for sitting in with us, giving us the rundown on the Atlantic Rally for Cruisers happening this year, and also going back to the hotel situation, the airports. We know that quite a few flights are coming in. I would like you to remind us later, but quite a few flights coming in this weekend. As many countries in Europe, we're seeing the UK going on another lockdown. I think it's called a circuit breaker lockdown, where they go down under for a period of time to ensure that they could manage the COVID-19 situation, re-emerging. We're having the new waves of COVID-19. A lot is happening, and we're seeing that we're seeing favorable responses from our visitors here in St. Lucia. We thank you for giving us that update. And so COVID-19, in a lot of ways, we're seeing how St. Lucia is able to muddle through, how St. Lucia is able to get by and buoy the situation with persons wanting to stay longer than they initially planned. And so, again, thank you for that update.
But before we say goodbye to Jory, just give me 45 seconds more with her. Jory, let's just go over the dates again. We are expecting a start. You said Las Palmas. The push-off from Las Palmas is happening tomorrow.
So ARC Plus kicks off tomorrow. That is kicking out from Las Palmas tomorrow, Sunday the 8th of November. And then you have the ARC kicking off on the 22nd of November.
We expect the first vessel to arrive in St. Lucia when?
Very early in December.
Okay, within the first 2 weeks?
Within the first week.
Yes. The first week?
Within the first week. Usually we see them, I think what we've observed the last couple of years is within 9 days or so. So we're gauging early December.
Okay, but one of the things that's still not too clear, and they're presenting the PCR test. They'll be quarantining. They should have quarantined for the 14-day period.
Well, from the time they obtain the COVID test in Las Palmas, they must go into isolation aboard their vessels. And so that means when they get to Las Palmas, they shop, they do everything that they have to do, they obtain that COVID result, and then they quarantine aboard the vessels, or isolate aboard the vessels rather. So from the time they get the result and they aboard the vessels, that's it. You're not allowed outdoors anymore.
Okay,
And we have
so it's
security.
not, so they're not going to the
WCC,
restaurant
should I
in
add,
the
is
marina.
ensuring that these protocols are adhered to in Las Palmas.
Great.
Yeah.
So now once they get here to St. Lucia, are they required to do another test at any point?
What we have observed, well, guided by the health authorities, once they have gone past a 14-day period, there would not necessarily be a need for a test at that point, because one would have gone past the incubation period, or the period where where if you were COVID-19 positive, that it would have peaked. So as much as they're observing a minimum of 1 week in Las Palmas in isolation, they're sailing down to St. Lucia. From the point of departure in Las Palmas, if they have not done 14 days underwater, they will still be required to quarantine in St. Lucia. So throughout, it's a quarantine process just to ensure that, you know, the environment is kept safe, our people are kept safe, and we are not really looking to add any more COVID cases at this point.
All right, thank you for that. Of course, we will be having much more a conversation on the
Definitely. It will be also good to hear from IGY in terms of their preparation, hear directly from them. And so next week we plan to do a lot more engagement in terms of our communication on the ARC.
Thank you.
Tony, any more queries on ARC?
Not necessarily. I'm just kind of excited what you mentioned earlier on about the...
And toasting to it?
No, the flights coming in as well. I mean, during the break you mentioned that we have a number of projected flights coming in for the winter season. Maybe you could just review some of the flights that have confirmed to come in, not just this weekend, but beyond this weekend, further into the winter season.
So apart from those that we have coming in today and this weekend, like I mentioned earlier, we have Air Canada returning for the first time, and we've received indication that they're at 99% capacity. We have United Airlines returning from Newark, New Jersey. There's JetBlue coming in from Boston. There's an additional American Airlines flight coming in from Miami. And throughout December, we should be noticing some more flights as well. And of course, these flights would definitely be extending into the April-May period, which is where we usually culminate that winter peak.
For returning nationals, are you having an influx in requests for home quarantine? What are the numbers that we're seeing on our end for?
That would be more or less the health team who would receive these requests. We know the form has been uploaded again to the stlucia.org/COVID-19 landing page. But more or less, I think the numbers have decreased in terms of the request. We have to ensure that those persons who are granted home quarantine are really persons who would be observing the protocols. Because it just takes one person to breach home quarantine, and that person could be positive, and then we have a situation on our hands that we're not looking forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, just to go over the flights that we're expecting this weekend for persons coming in, trying to squeeze in on flights before we have this lockdown in the UK. British Airways is really gonna be in St. Lucia up until the 11th. In fact, their last flight is the 11th. They have also indicated that once lockdown is over, they're ready to resume service. And so lockdown ends on the 2nd. I believe we can be looking at the 3rd of December for a resumption of service, should the UK lift their ban at that time. But people are still allowed to travel out in terms of work. So anybody who is requiring to travel out for work from the UK can do so. In fact, we do have some visiting journalists on the island. We've always told the story of our responsible phased reopening, but I think sometimes it's fair enough to allow others to do that and allow them to tell the story. So they've indicated an interest to be here in St. Lucia to, write about St. Lucia's travel protocols. So we've allowed for them to be here as well to really tell the story on what St. Lucia is doing. Wonderful. I think we've probed you thoroughly. We'd like to thank you so much for your time, Doreen. Doreen Georges, Public Relations Manager at the Tourism Authority here in St. Lucia. We're due for another break. When we come back, we go over some of the stories that made the headlines this week. Stay with us.
Virus, ready to harm us. Panic is
better yet use soap and water.
We must protect each other if we are to beat this corona. Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. Be a soldier, together we can beat this corona.
So you don't become the next case. Avoid touching your face. I'm sure you've been told so. Handshakes and hugging are a no.
Advice, give you the please. Cover your mouth and your nose if you cough or sneeze.
Practice social distancing and avoid large social gatherings.
Together let us win this war. Be a soldier for St. Lucia. Together let us win this war. St. Lucia, be a soldier. Together we can beat this corona.
For further information, please contact the hotline at 311 or the Bureau of Health Education at 468-5349.
Thank you so much for staying tuned. We just have Ms. Doreen Georges there making her exit, Public Relations Manager at the St. Lucia Tourism Authority, speaking to us on the upcoming ARC, Atlantic Rally for Cruisers, and also giving us an update on our status at the ports, what our flights are looking like, especially going into the winter season. So we definitely appreciate that update. We thank you, Ms. Doreen Georges, for that. And definitely goes to show that, you know, even despite the adversity of COVID-19, Lisa Tony, that we are able to still remain buoyant to some extent, have flights coming in amid great uncertainty. We have visitors who are very enthusiastic about coming to get a break here in our sweet island.
But it's what the numbers, as research is showing, that people, the Caribbean, and it's usually a favorable place to come for you to let your hair down, so to speak. But during the COVID period, it shows that people are actively seeking out the Caribbean. So there is that feel that in order for you to sort of stay safe and wait out the pandemic, the Caribbean is a place to be. Now, people with the deep pockets, they have the money, they've decided to leave their home and they're making the Caribbean their second home. And to just wait it out, whether that means in the next year, 2 years, but there are people who are prepared to wait out the pandemic right here in the Caribbean. So in as much as COVID-19 has brought all of this doom and gloom, there are some bright spots that we can really look to capitalize on if we're looking hard enough for the positive.
And I also think in an earlier interview, the Prime Minister did mention that we'll be rolling out a program where persons were allowed to come in and work virtually from St. Lucia if they so desired, you know, so over a period of time, 3 months, 6 months, that you could, you know, work away from home, you know, travel to St. Lucia and, you know, engage in your business activities virtually.
I was thinking that when Doreen was speaking about persons wanting to come to stay for longer periods, you know, you can really, the world has no borders right now when it comes to this pandemic. And you can really be here and resume your work activity from your laptop, from the comfort of your suite, you know, if needs be, without having to be in a gray home apartment in the UK and trying to work from home there, you know.
So, well, that's it, because we know Barbados has rolled out program in that fashion. The other islands too are considering what can they offer to certainly entice people to come their way as well. But you know, again, I think I've said this before, but looking at the reopening of St. Kitts borders
this week,
I'm seeing that the very protocols that St. Lucia instituted off the bat all those months ago, it's the same thing that they're doing. And all of the other islands, because, you know, I am continuously struck by the fact that when we had requested the 48-hour PCR testing to be done, then there was so much pressure that was placed on the government that, well, flights will not come in because you're asking people for tests with the 48-hour, but their country's doing that now. Then we moved to the 72-hour PCR testing period. But that's what the countries are doing now. But we were so hard on ourselves back then, not fully understanding that we were actually blazing that trail. We were leading that charge. And now the countries are going back to what we did initially. So sometimes I just think that we too hard on ourselves. We do not appreciate perhaps that within our space we have individuals, professionals who are a cut above the rest. So
Absolutely. And just kudos to the authorities who, from the onset decided to make these decisions, much to the chagrin of many, many not understanding what was at play, as you mentioned, Lisa, trailblazing, because now we're seeing, as you mentioned, St. Kitts coming out of their own lockdown, and they're just beginning. Meanwhile, we have an advantage in having done so long ago.
Well, hindsight, in St. Kitts, I'm not hearing people complaining about, asking people for the 72 hours or anyone talking about the protocols and why you must have us do this and that. So they pretty much, that country, they've embraced it because what has happened now is that you have all of that.
Textbook info.
Exactly. So all of that there now is really informing what they're doing.
We're going to take a break from the COVID-19 news and all of the all that surrounds it in terms of tourism, as speaking with Ms. Georges earlier, to bring in news from the agricultural sector. We have 20 farmers who've signed off on a purchase agreement with the St. Lucia Marketing Board. We have this report coming from Anicia Antoine. Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties with that. We're just continuing. Hopefully we can get that report online soon because it's very important. The National Competitiveness and Productivity Council is currently seeking a public comment and feedback on 2 pieces of draft legislation expected to have a direct positive impact on the private and productive sectors of our economy. The 2 draft pieces of legislation in question are the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Bill and the Security Interests in Movable Property Bill. We have Glenn Simon with this report. Okay, we seem to have our wires crossed. What we're going to do is take a quick break, get that fixed, and when we come back, we'll bring you the news.
We got this. Yeah. I'll for make it. Ooh. We don't have no other choice but to be strong.
We're gonna make it.
I am a voice of hope, and I just wanna let you know that I believe in our strength as a people and the promise of a bright tomorrow.
And I want you to believe and trust.
I know God is watching over us, and I believe if we all come together now, everything will be alright.
We only press on.
Strength of the bond and the ties among this generation.
Unite and be one. The fight will be won.
Come on, Caribbean.
Don't worry about the circumstances. Don't stress about the fears and the madness. Together we will take our chance at life and conquer it. Don't worry about the circumstances. Don't stress about the fears and the madness. Together we will take our chance at life, 'cause we got this. We got this. We got this. We got this. Caribbean people, we got this.
We got this. We got this. We got this. We got this. We got this. We got this. We got this. I am the strength within, yeah,
I know that we will rise again, and I'm sure we can lift on people.
It's a fight and we must all be shared. I can't believe this day has come.
For our sake, we must keep distance. Everyone looking out for the neighbor. Islands in the Caribbean sun.
It's time to be strong, the battle is on.
For the future of each generation.
Every daughter and son united as one.
Sing on, Caribbean. Don't worry about the circumstances. It's just about the fears and the madness. Together we will take our chance at life and conquer it. Don't worry about the circumstances.
Must come.
It's just about the fears and the madness. Together we will take our chance.
No stress.
We got this. We got this. working on the front line. Don't know how you cope. Thanks for working on the front line. My angels in disguise. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring tears of joy to my eyes. Thanks for working on the front line. You bring us home. Thanks for working on the front line. Don't know how you cope. Thanks for working on the front line. My angels in disguise. You bring tears of joy to my eyes.
Okay, we've got our wires connected. We'd like to thank you so much for your patience. 20 farmers signed off on a purchase agreement with the St. Lucia Marketing Board. This week, we have the details from Minister Antoine. Take a look.
The Department of Agriculture, St. Lucia Marketing Board, and the Taiwan Technical Mission has entered into a contractual agreement with a core of farmers in an effort to ensure a consistent supply of produce throughout the year. The purchase agreement will strengthen ties between the St. Lucia Marketing Board and local farmers, thereby enhancing the marketing strategy of produce from the farming community. Under the agreement, the 20 chosen farmers are required to supply a variety of crops, including the 7 crops under the enhancement of the efficiency of production distribution supply chain in the fruits and vegetable sector project, more widely known as the 7 Crops Project. Operations Manager of the St. Lucia Marketing Board, Teresa Daisy, explains that this initiative is in keeping with the mandate of the Marketing Board to support farmers extensively throughout the island.
Those farmers will be issued a 6-month contract in the initial stage, and at the end of the contract, they will be issued some incentives in the form of fertilizer and ground cover. Now, to qualify for these incentives, farmers must sell an amount no less than 5,000 worth of produce to the Marketing Board. After the 6 months contract comes to an end, the contract will be extended, providing farmers complete and adhere to the contract. Now, those farmers here will be viewed as living testimonies to other farmers because we intend to extend the contract to other farmers who will be signing the contracts today.
Ambassador of the Republic of China Taiwan to St. Lucia, His Excellency Peter Shen, says the purchase agreement between the St. Lucia Marketing Board and the farmers marks a new milestone for the development of St. Lucia's agricultural sector.
It is very encouraging to learn that about 15 farmers will sign a contract with St. Lucia Marketing Board today. And I'm looking forward to see more farmers participating in the near future. Taiwan will continue to work with the government of St. Lucia to promote precision agriculture, smart agriculture, and achieve 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries, Physical Planning, Natural Resources and Cooperatives, Honorable Ezekiel Joseph, encourages the farmers to honor their contractual agreements to ensure the success of the pilot project.
Do not enter into a contractual arrangement with the St. Lucia Marketing Board, and we agree that you're going to sell whatever crop at a certain price, and some individual, some middleman will come to you and say, I give you 25 cents more. And you will say, look, I am selling to that middleman because I get 25 cents more. That would create problems for the program. Because the same way St. Lucia, the Marketing Board, is expecting you to produce and to bring in the products, the same way they will enter into arrangements with supermarkets to be able to supply the products. So on both sides, we have to be committed.
The Minister for Agriculture continues to reaffirm the government's commitment to enable a thriving agricultural economy in St. Lucia. From the Information Unit at the Ministry of Agriculture, I am Anicia Antoine reporting.
And that report there from Anicia Antoine on the 20 farmers signing off on an agreement with the St. Lucia Marketing Board. We also have an update on the Fishers, a half-day meeting between Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chasney, Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries, and also the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries, Honorable Ezekiel Joseph, and representatives of the fishing sector, has resulted in an amicable and unanimous position for the sector's role in helping to protect the nation's borders amid community spread of COVID-19. The meeting was convened to discuss the one-week suspension of fishing licenses as government refined protocols for the sector. Acknowledging the importance of the fishing sector, its contribution to the local economy and food security, the government has decided to allow fishers to resume their trade. This happened this week. However, it must be between the hours of 4 a.m. and 7 p.m. daily. Captains or owners of fishing vessels must share information on their vessel with the Marine Police. The VG Lighthouse must also be furnished with the relevant information when a vessel is leaving port. No more than 3 people are allowed on board a fishing vessel at a time when offshore.
We are going to continue revisiting the protocols that were set in April. And in addition to that, we are going to reduce on the hours that they are allowed to go to sea. And for the next 3 weeks, whilst we look at more medium to long-term solutions. Okay.
There from the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries, Honorable Ezekiel Joseph. We have Operations Manager of Goodwill Fishermen's Cooperative Society, Kejiana Tuse-Shalri. She says the meeting was productive on many fronts.
Most of the issues we were confronted with as a fisher folk with the news of the week suspension, I think we were adequately able to exploit at the meeting. And what we are most happy about is that our fisher folk will be able to resume work in about a day. So we're very happy about that news.
The statutory instrument containing the measures were published on the 4th of November. That was Wednesday. The measures took effect on Thursday, 5th November 2020. And just going back to that press conference, Lisa Tony, I remember the police advising and asking anyone who has any information with respect to persons who facilitate the illegal entry of persons into the island to report it to them, and giving a list of numbers that they can call if they feel their plight will not be heard, their information will not be considered at the lower levels, even phone contact information to the minister, the head of Marine Police. And we also heard from another representative, a former executive member of the Groselay Fishermen's Cooperative, making the plea to fishermen to keep away from any illicit activity, especially bringing persons in from neighboring hotspots. So that word there from the representative from the Goodwill Fishermen's Cooperative Society, just, speaking on how productive that meeting went, and hopefully we do see a reduction. We do hope we register a reduction in reports to the authorities on these cases. Just continuing, we mentioned earlier the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council is seeking public comment and feedback on 2 pieces of legislation. And I thought it was important for us to air it on the week in review, just to get more traction for this very important initiative. These 2 pieces of legislation, draft legislation, is expected to have direct positive impact on the private and productive sectors of our economy. The 2 draft pieces of legislation in question are the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Bill and the Security Interests in Movable Property Bill. We have the details from Glenn Simon.
Pillar 4 of the St. Lucia Economic Recovery and Resilience Plan is geared at building resilience of the private and productive sectors of the economy. Policy Intervention number 24, outlined under this pillar, seeks to support the business environment by fast-tracking legislation to increase access to finance by MSMEs. Shama Mathre is the economist with the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council, NCPC, the agency spearheading the legislative reforms.
Currently, we're in the process of finalizing the security interest in movable property bill, and this is essentially a piece of legislation which enables the use of movable assets as collateral in order to access financing from banks. We're also in the process of finalizing another bill, which is the bankruptcy and insolvency bill. And this is a piece of legislation which basically works with businesses and individuals who have fallen into economic crisis by giving them a chance at reorganizing or rehabilitating their debt so as to meet their financial obligations to the bank. Now, the latter reform and piece of legislation is a significant one for the financial sector as well as the economy as a whole.
The bills are expected to generate greater confidence among MSMEs in accessing finance for business expansion, exports, and employment generation, while providing security and redress to financial institutions transacting business with MSMEs. She added that the drafting process has been very meticulous and involved extensive stakeholder consultation via a steering committee comprising representation from the Bar Association, Bankers Association, various private sector associations, key agencies and government ministries, as well as civil society organizations.
We also worked with the World Bank Secure Transactions legal specialists as well as the bankruptcy and insolvency legal specialists. And those persons have a wealth of knowledge and experience in terms of drafting those types of legislation and even implementing these reforms in other jurisdictions around the world. And of course, they took into consideration our local context.
That report there from Glenn Simon on the consultation that is being had on these two pieces of legislation. We continue to take a look back at the week that was roadworks in the Rodney Bay area. If you've happened to traverse to that area in the last few weeks, you'd have seen that there's some construction. It has now entered a heightened phase as the road improvement project being undertaken there by the Ministry of Infrastructure progresses. We have Herma Demac, who joined our team this week, Lisa. She has a report on the status of that.
The Rodney Bay area is one of the busiest in the country, and the road improvement project aims to alleviate the traffic woes experienced by daily commuters. The project is currently in the first of two phases. Phase 1 encompasses the widening of the road for 4-lane capabilities, drainage and slabbing works, pedestrian sidewalks, and the placement of roundabouts. The second phase includes the building of walkovers, placement of median barriers, and road lighting. Communications Officer in the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports, Energy and Labour, Shannon LeBon, says this project will vastly improve the user experience and safety of pedestrians and drivers.
We'd appreciate historically the main Rodney Bay junction has been identified as a point of and a cause of traffic congestion. You have people leaving Rodney Bay, wanting to turn right onto the highway to head to Cash Streets and people heading southbound. So a bit of a conflict there. So this project will address the situation, improve the flow of traffic, improve safety for both motorists and pedestrians, the pedestrian sidewalks. You have 2 lanes heading north, 2 lanes heading southbound. So it's going to be a 4-lane stretch of road once successfully completed. And you also have an overhead walk pass for pedestrians as well, adding to the safety elements of this undertaking.
The project manager in the Ministry of Infrastructure, Tiberius Roberts, says deliberate efforts ensure that current roadworks do not affect daily commute of road users.
The number one thing we took into consideration was the traffic, and the bulk of our work is being done at night time, purposely for that reason. We try our utmost best not to affect the traffic. We've had discussions with the Royal Central Police Force Traffic Department, and we come at night, we do our bulk of our work, we detour traffic as we work and in conjunction with the police department. And during the day, we allow the traffic to flow comfortably. And any of our guys you see in the day is basically doing some preparation in the drains, which will not affect the traffic in any way.
After stakeholder consultations, the ministry is considering the relocation of bus stops. The Rodney Bay Road Improvement Project is a design, construct, finance agreement with Fresh Start Construction and management systems by the Ministry of Infrastructure. The first phase of the project is expected to be complete in 4 weeks. From the Government Information Service, Hilma Dimark reporting.
That report there from Homer DeMac speaking on this latest project happening in Rodney Bay, that area to create a 4-lane roadway and also an overhead pass for pedestrians. Certainly this is going to relieve traffic. We know certain times during the week and even in the morning, it can get very, brought to a snail pace. So definitely relieving traffic there.
Relieving traffic and relieving stress, Jesse. Traversing those roads is very, very stressful on a regular basis, and especially in light of coming into what traditionally has been, your peak Christmas season, that period. It's a nightmare.
Now, it is. Can you remember what it was like when you were traveling along that roadway there, the roundabout from Sunny Acres there, Friendship and roundabout, and having to go past to the shock.
Yes.
Yeah. Remember the nightmare that used to be?
Yeah.
What a distant, faded memory this is now, isn't it? Because now that we have that dual carriageway there, and that free flowing of the traffic happening there, because I remember, the inconvenience certainly, but wonders. Look how it has turned out for us in the end. So I know that going further up, there will always be those inconveniences, but at the end of the day, the end result really tells you, well, okay, little inconvenience, not so bad after all, if you're going to get such an effective result at the end of it all. And then I was having this discussion with a friend. I was saying, well, when we look at it, the development of St. Lucia, yes, that population increase to the north of the island, that is something that keeps going exponentially. Apart from addressing that roadway, the only other option I'm seeing to really control traffic flow is to tell people, stop buying, don't import cars anymore. We certainly have enough. For an island our size, we certainly have enough. And so, what's a little inconvenience? If you want to buy your own vehicle, get new roads. Get new roads.
And I'm happy to hear that, that the majority of the works are taking place during the evening.
Yes.
Yeah.
When, especially right now, we're supposed to be at home from 9 until 5 in the morning. So there are less inconvenience of traffic and the works going on at the same time.
The only thing, Tony, is that it's raining so much these days. Yeah. So there you go. That's sort of spoke in the wheel. Can't really do all of that construction work, the road works, during the rain.
At the pace that you'd like.
Yes, at the pace that you'd like. So there will be delays inevitably because of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, we've so far heard from the government of St. Lucia that construction, the World Bank, these institutions have indicated that construction is one of the ways to spur economic activity in your country. We're seeing other construction activities going on island-wide, and we appeal to the general public for your cooperation at this time and understanding, understanding the effects of it. The tentacles of that sort of activity here on island. I know we have the Laretret Road happening. That's in the back Moshi there, coming out of Rodney Bay. That work is ongoing. Also Corinth, it continues. Tony, your side.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, that will be sped up.
Okay.
No, that's just to the north of the island, because you also have work happening to the south. So around the island, you have the various projects ongoing and just trying to improve what that national road network is.
Absolutely.
And we need that considering matters of road safety as well.
Yes.
So hoping that with all of the new road works, you will come new signage, better signage, and certainly certain measures, safety measures, to really help our people stay safe on the roads.
Yeah, because sidewalks and drainage are key components of the majority of those road works.
Well, the drainage is so important, Tony,
because
we know all of that runoff, the water, settling into places, creating all of those potholes, helping to create the potholes.
The very road that you're trying to fix.
So, we don't want to have to be doing the constant video game
Yes.
It's almost like when you're driving, it's like you're at the console of a video game, swerving here, swerving there.
But it's definitely, good news and good to see that we have this at this location, the Rodney Bay area, the expansion, as you mentioned, Lisa, the dual carriageway. Hopefully, we could see a great improvement by Christmas as to how people traverse our roads. We're winding down for the morning. We do have Remembrance Day scheduled for tomorrow, and I know Her Majesty the Queen has approved the observation of Remembrance Day as a national day of remembrance for those who lost their lives in the two world wars. This year, however, owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, there will not be the usual military parade here in St. Lucia and the laying of the wreath ceremony in observance of Remembrance Day. So that will not be happening tomorrow. We're dealing with an epidemic here on island, and so we need to be careful. That's one of the events that have had to be put off. Cognizant of the increase in the COVID-19 infections, this decision has been taken in an effort to safeguard the health and welfare of our war heroes, as they are one of the most vulnerable
groups
at this time. So congregating now would not be a wise idea. And speaking of which, just to wrap up for the morning, we have St. Lucia celebrating the milestone of 2 centenarians from the Grosley district. And we'd like to say happy birthday to these 2 individuals. They celebrated this week, and we do wish them all the best. And I think we should end on this note and give our final words for the morning and let them be the icing on the cake with that. We'd like to thank you so much for watching. Lisa, Tony, final words?
Well, I would love to live long, but I don't know if I'll be living to 102 and 105. But certainly, I'm wishing everyone a very, very good weekend, and that we can start off Monday with a bang and with some good news and keep the trajectory of good news for the week.
As always, for me, a very safe weekend, wishing everyone to remain safe. The rains have been pouring. We've witnessed a bit of flooding in certain areas, so continue to remain safe, be vigilant, be observant of your surroundings, and stay indoors as much as possible. Stay safe and dry. These days, Lisa, with COVID, you don't even want a drop of rain because you don't want to have any slight cough, because everyone turns around and look at you when you're out in public.
Sneezing.
So even when you feel like coughing, sometimes you have to stifle that cough, hold it in. So please remain dry and safe, St. Lucia, and be our own brother's keeper. And yes.
Absolutely. And I feel compelled to remind you all of the COVID-19 protocols. We have 888, the 888 number of dengue cases confirmed here on island. Look around your home, ensure that you don't have any receptacles that's collecting water, stagnant water areas around your home. Use the mosquito repellent. Protect yourself and your family. We've so far recorded deaths due to dengue fever here on island. And as Tony mentioned, last weekend we saw heavy rains. Saturday, the all-weekend trough, and the tropical wave that we had on the Friday, bringing a lot of rains, bringing flooding and land slippage in certain parts of the area of St. Lucia. So please take care this weekend. We're seeing some rains as well, so stay safe and stay dry. I'd like to thank you so much for watching the Weekend Review. And we close off with this report on 2 St. Lucians celebrating the 100-year mark. Do enjoy the rest of it. Cheers.
Centenarians are rare, and it is a marvel to hear a person celebrating their 100th birthday. The government of St. Lucia is recognizing 2 such individuals celebrating 100 years of life and counting. The first is Marie Charles, more affectionately known as Macienne. Marie was born on the 1st of November 1920. 100 years later, she lives to celebrate with family in her community of Derimo Moshi. At a small gathering on her 100th birthday, the government presented Marie with tokens of appreciation. The centenarian says although she's uncertain what allows a person to live this long, she believes diet is important.
Farine, à manger, un banja, nous avons tout ce ça. C'est ça qui fait. Si l'on mange, on va manger, si l'on mange, Manger, si c'est film, comment il était comme film. Si c'est ma femme, comment il est wagon. C'est le manger.
Okay.
Marie says she's no longer able to move around, but she is thankful to have her sight. Ms. Sian outlived 8 siblings and is the mother of 7 children, 2 of which have died. She was employed with the government of St. Lucia for several years as a cook, has worked as a farmhand, and was well known as a market vendor selling brooms, charcoal, and farine, which she also produced. The second centenarian is Eldika Nicholas, also of Deremo Moshi. She reached the milestone of 106 years on the 23rd of October 2020. The centenarian was presented with hampers by the Minister for Equity, Social Justice, Local Government and Empowerment and the Parliamentary Representative for Grosley, Honorable Leonard Montoute. Honorable Montoute wished Eldika a happy birthday and toasted to her long life.
Bon la vie pour continuer à enjoy it. Happy birthday.
Eldika attributes her long life to the grace of God and is thankful for the gift of many years. From the Government Information Service, I am Humid Mark.